Okay, so here we are in my After Effects file where I've gone in and strung all this together, added some text, things like that. The audio will also be in here once I have that finished. But this is kind of, I wish I could just give you a full tutorial on this, and if there's enough demand for it, I might, but I am really not an After Effects expert. I've just kind of hacked my way through it enough to do what I needed to do. But similarly to the way I learned Blender, I didn't try to push it too hard. I'm not trying to do crazy stuff in After Effects. I'm just learning to do just what I need to do and not much more than that. So that leaves me with a relatively easy workflow, which is what we're going to walk through really quickly here. So if you don't know anything about After Effects, it's basically just a video editing software. You pull in your content over here, and then I'm dragging them down onto layers, which are down here. And we can just kind of walk through each of these layers. So KieranBlack.co and Dirk.com, those are at the end here. So I just put those right there. And then they each have, so you can keyframe like the opacity. So all I did was, added a text layer, which is what these red things are. And then right here are keyframes similar to Blender, where right there it's at 0, and then it fades up to 100% opacity. It stays there. So there's another keyframe there, 100, and then it goes back down to 0. And that's basically it for the entire file. So similarly on this one, this is actually a pre-composition. So you can actually make a composition that's composed of multiple. So rather than having that be all, be two separate things like it was. So that, these are two separate things. I could have pre-composed those into one composition, but like this DK present, for example, composition, that's just comprised of two things. They each have some animation of their own. Now, the reason I put those together was so that I could create a mask. So if we look down here, there's basically mask. This is something I know you can also do in Blender in the compositor. I'm just not very familiar with it, so that's why it's done here. But basically, I just have this box that I've aligned to the edge of my animation there, and it's feathered slightly. You can see here so that I can control. Since we have the depth of field in there, we want to kind of match that a little bit so that it's blurry and not a sharp line. But basically, I set a mask here, and then it just follows that line just with these two keyframes, because another huge advantage working with linear animation, it's very easy to line anything up, because if it's in one spot and then it's in another spot, the only way it goes there is a straight line. So I just did kind of a nice little masking effect there, which I thought was nice. And then, so that's the reason those are together. And then this label image, that's just the label image at the end. Again, just a simple fade in, fade out is all that happened there. I controlled the curves a little bit here. That's something I'm beginning to be familiar with in After Effects, but basically just simple fade in, fade out. For what's the next layer here? We've got the end label. What is the end label? Oh, that's this. So that again is its own composition of just that little line and then the text. So that just also is a fade in. You can see fades in right there, and then it fades out. And then, so the adjustment layer is kind of like that's where I just added a very basic vignette. You can see if we toggle that on and off, you can probably hardly see it even. But if we toggle that on and off, you can see it's just kind of basically a vignette, darkens the edges a little bit and pulls your eye just a little bit more towards the center. So that's all that's doing, and that adds it to all the layers underneath it. Now close is the final sequence. That's one I think we called spin out in the tutorial. And that is just, it's just these frames all together. Now I think it's pre-composed because, I wanted to, in case I needed it to fade out slower, basically what I did is I just added the last frame as a still image at the very end. So that even though the animation ends, maybe I wanted it to fade out just a little bit longer than I had rendered. I could just use this still image at the end. And I think that's kind of what I ended up doing there. And then we've got the cube, which is just its own little short, small video here that's just stuck to the edge. And then this, you can see, we talked about this a little bit, but the floating thing. So I actually rendered the whole thing out, but I just slid it over. And my reasoning for having the cube on the left versus the right was that in this opening, we're looking in the middle, we read the text, we're looking to the left, and we see the labels. And while we're still looking left, our eye is kind of caught by that cube. And then we see this, we're looking in the middle, we see that kind of highlight. And then, while our eye is still in the middle, our attention is taken by this final shot. And that kind of all fades out. So those are the thoughts there. And then at the very bottom of this composition, I just have just a blank gray layer. That's just a solid color. And that's what everything is kind of fading out to, is that color. So that's about it that I really want to talk about in After Effects. I know a lot of times at the end of my tutorials, I just leave it with, okay, now render it. And yeah, there is a lot of stuff I do after that. The main reason I don't go over it is because it's not in Blender and I'm just not as familiar with a software like After Effects. But this is what actually happens behind the scenes to most of the things you see me post. Is it goes through this type of a process where I can, edit the colors lightly if I need to, add some text, and just make sure everything is looking good. This is also where I would typically add audio, but again, you can do stuff like that in Blender just fine. I just don't do it that way, so I can't tell you exactly how to do it, but I would like to eventually, maybe as the video sequence editor improves, start using Blender more for things like that, because I don't love After Effects. I'm not like an Adobe fanboy at all. In fact, I get very frustrated with Adobe software sometimes, but it is the industry standard. A lot of people have it, and I don't hate working in it for now. So that's kind of the reasoning behind all that. So with that, I'm sure I'll have some type of video that wraps this whole thing up. I don't know what that's going to be yet. I probably need to get recording that, because if you have looked down here in the bottom right, it is Wednesday, and I said I would have this tutorial done by the end of the week. So give me some time. I need to start working on that. But without further ado, thanks again for being here. Like and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Teachable, thanks for being here as well. And I'm going to be curious to know kind of what you thought about this tutorial. It's quite a bit longer than anything else I've done. I'll try to maybe put together a survey or somehow try to reach out to people. I know Teachable, I'll have your email addresses, so that'll be helpful to see what you liked and didn't like. But yeah, we'll see where it goes from here. Thanks for being here, and hope you're having a great day. Go for a walk if you didn't go for a walk earlier when we talked about it. Thanks everyone.